Hi, my name is Bruno Moreland and I teach AP African American Studies. And in this series, I'm going to go over all the required sources in the AP African American Studies curriculum. Today, we're looking at Unit Topic 2.3, Departure Zones in Africa and the Slave Trade in the United States. There's two required sources in this topic, and they're both sets of maps that detail the growth and extent of the transatlantic slave trade. So for a little context on the transatlantic slave trade, it lasted for about 350 years, from 1526 to 1857. There were about 12.5 million people that survived the journey across the Atlantic and made it to North or South America. This figure does not include the nearly 1.8 million that died aboard these ships. As we'll see in later topics, some of them died because of the terrible conditions on board, and some of them jumped overboard and committed suicide as a form of resistance for their enslavement. This figure also doesn't capture the people that died in the slave trade as they were caught in the interior Africa and then transported in coffles to the coastal cities where they were bought by European countries. What this map does show is all of the destinations of where people in the transatlantic slave trade were transported to, and directly to the United States. There were about 388,000 people that were directly sent to anywhere that later became the United States. That's about 5% of the total people that survived the transatlantic slave trade. That also doesn't include the people that were transported to somewhere in the Caribbean, or what was known as the West Indies back then, and then later sold or transported to the United States afterwards. On the right side of the map, you can see the two major sources of the transatlantic slave trade. The first, it's what's called West Africa, is the entire region and coastal area that stretches from Senegambia to the Bight of Biafra. And the second one is what's called West Central Africa, that includes Angola and the Kingdom of the Congo. On the western side of the map, you can see where the destinations of the ships that transported people were going to, and the major destination is Brazil and South America. The next largest destination is what was called the West Indies, or what we now call the Caribbean. But something else that's missing from this map is that we can't see exactly who is responsible for the transport of all of these people. There are 4 European countries that are responsible for the vast majority of people transported in the transatlantic slave trade. The largest one by far is Portugal with 5.8 million people. Then it's Great Britain with 3.3 million people, then France with 1.4 million, and finally Spain with 1.1 million. The uses for enslaved labor changed over time. Initially, they were used on sugarcane plantations, first off the coast of Africa, later on in Brazil and the West Indies. In places with possible gold or silver deposits, they were used as miners. Later on, as agriculture exports evolved in what was called the New World, they were used for coffee, tobacco, and cotton plantations. As we go through this unit, we're going to see more required sources that show us the conditions of what it was like for people to travel aboard these ships, and then later on what life was like for them once they arrived at these various different locations and were required to engage in the different types of work. The second map shows percentages of where people were taken from that were later subjected to the transatlantic slave trade. The first place that should stand out is what was called the Slave Coast. That again is the region from Senegambia all the way to the Bight of Biafra. And in these places, Europeans set up outposts or forts where slave ships would stop as they went through the coast of Africa, buy enslaved people, and then once they filled their hulls, they would go on to make the transatlantic journey. Some of the most famous outposts are Gorée Island off the coast of Senegal and Elmina Castle off the coast of Ghana. The second major region that was a source for the transatlantic slave trade is Angola, and as you can see on the map, it made up about 25% of the people that underwent the horrendous Middle Passage. Now, what is it that you're supposed to get out of these two maps? Yes, you're able to see the magnitude of the transatlantic slave trade and the amount of time for which it was active. But what we should really think about is the impact that it had on the regions where people were taken from and how those people shaped the new places that they were sent to. So because enslaved people were taken from vastly different areas, from different ethnic groups and had different cultures all across Africa, when they were put on ships and then landed into North and South America, there was a vast amount of cultural diffusion that happened as a result of this. Cultures and languages mixed with each other, creating Creole languages like Gullah or Geechee in what's later in the United States. Other times they mixed their languages with that of their enslavers, creating Creole versions of Spanish and French. And the genetic impact of this could still be seen today as modern day African Americans and people of the African diaspora may have a really varied genetic makeup. They might have ancestors that came from West Central Africa and also West Africa. These maps help you visualize the spread of the African diaspora and might make you think that the experience of everyone who was enslaved was not uniform or monolithic. As we move through the course, we'll also see what the experience was like of those people that were enslaved in places of South America like Brazil, and you'll be able to compare it to the experience of African Americans in the United States. Well, those are the only two required sources for this topic. I hope you got something out of it, and if you think that I left something out, please let me know in the comments. I hope to see you back for the next video when we go over the capture and impact of the slave trade on Africa. Thank you.